NATO to drop a major hurdle for Ukraine? That is the question. NATO is set to drop a major hurdle to Ukraine's bid for membership in the alliance. This is according to a Western official. The Kremlin says that President Putin met with Wagner chiefs on June 29th in the Kremlin, days after the mercenary group attempted to topple Russia's military leadership. Prince King Charles welcomes U.S. President Joe Biden to Windsor Castle. They are expected to discuss climate change, a cause that the monarch has long embraced. Spain says that it has deployed a plane to search for 200 migrants aboard a boat missing in the Atlantic after setting off from the coast of Senegal. A 25-year-old man is suspected of attacking a kindergarten in China's Guangdong province, killing 6 and injuring 1. The incident triggers concerns about violence against children at school. And a 6th seed Rohan Bopana and Matthew Ebden are a win away from the men's double quarterfinal at Wimbledon. The Indo-Australian pair take down British wildcard Jacob Fernley and Johannes Monday in straight sets.
They showed real promise, certainly in that first set.
As world leaders prepare to gather this week for a much-anticipated NATO summit in the Lithuanian capital, Vilnius, the alliance's unity may be put to the test once again. This as divisions over the type of assurances made to Ukraine regarding its future membership becomes starker. More than 500 days since the war broke out in Ukraine, Kyiv has pressed to become a part of the military alliance, which some member countries appear to be reluctant to provide. Volodymyr Zelensky has been arguing that the security assurances given by Moscow, Washington, and London when it relinquished its nuclear arsenal to Russia in 1994 were clearly worthless at this point. With the summit in Lithuania's capital on the horizon, some Eastern European countries say that the summit should offer a roadmap for Kyiv as it pushes to join the summit. Although the United States and Germany are wary of any move that might take the alliance closer to war with Russia. Moreover, Russian President Vladimir Putin has cited time and again over the past 2 decades that NATO's expansion towards Russia's borders was a key reason for Moscow's decision to send tens of thousands of troops into neighboring Ukraine last year. The Kremlin has even said that Ukrainian membership of the NATO military alliance will have negative consequences for Europe's security architecture. And Russia will consider such a step a threat, which demands a harsh response. But the question which arises now is, will Ukraine ever become part of NATO? Any expansion of the military alliance must be agreed by all 31 members, and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has already ruled out a formal invitation for Kyiv at the summit. Moreover, in 2008, NATO agreed to the Bucharest summit that Ukraine could eventually join the alliance, but NATO leaders did not give Kyiv the membership action plan laying out a roadmap for bringing it closer to the bloc. Under the membership action plan, candidates have to prove that they meet political, economic, and military criteria and are able to contribute militarily to NATO operations. And since 1999, most countries aiming to join NATO have participated in a map Although this procedure is not mandatory, according to NATO officials, the alliance is hinting towards dropping this hurdle for Kyiv as well. Earlier, Finland and Sweden, formerly neutral states which work closely with NATO, were invited to join the alliance, directly bypassing the membership action plan. While Finland became a NATO member recently, Sweden is yet to become a member. Sweden might get the nod after Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that his country could approve Sweden's membership if European nations, quote, open the way for Turkey's bid to join the European Union. Although for Ukraine, it is still unclear what path NATO will take to make it a member. As one thing is clear, with Kyiv still being actively involved in the war, it is a huge hurdle for Ukraine. Even the U.S. president has said to consider Ukraine's membership for NATO, the war with Russia must come to an end. This is because if Kyiv is made a member, the alliance under Article 5 then will have to immediately draw itself into an active war, as under Article 5 of NATO's Washington Treaty states that attack on one ally is considered an attack on all allies, which NATO is currently unwilling to do as they try to shield their country from a possible Russian aggression. For more on this, we are being joined by Vadim Turkhan from the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. Vadim is a former diplomat. Thank you so much for joining us on WION and for providing your views. It seems that Ukraine is keen to gain NATO membership, understandably from the Ukrainian side. However, there are some countries that in the NATO bloc, including the United States, that believe it's very testy and dangerous for Ukraine to join NATO at this point, again, because NATO would become party to the war automatically because Ukraine is fighting Russia. Can you share your thoughts with us?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be again on your broadcast, and I would like to say all the best to your spectaculars, to your people who are watching you. This is first. Secondly, and of course, Ukraine will not become a member of NATO tomorrow, and even day after tomorrow. It would be very much naive to think that tomorrow or day after tomorrow, during Vilnius summit, Ukraine will be announced officially as member state of NATO. This is second, and nobody actually expected. But third, what is most important for Ukraine? Ukraine would like to have clear timetable. When and how, on what condition Ukraine will become a NATO member state. Personally, I think that the best way for NATO to invite Ukraine tomorrow, and then to go through all the procedures during 1 year before Washington summit will be prepared, and then during Washington summit, which will be jubilee summit, 75 years of NATO establishment dedicated, it will be very much natural to announce that Ukraine has become a member state and to go through all the procedures of ratification of appropriate protocol of signing of Ukrainian membership to NATO during this year. This is, optimal, the best option for Ukraine and for NATO. And now I explain why it is important for NATO, not just for Ukraine. NATO is very powerful military political bloc, or political military bloc, which is dealing with security. And this is most sufficient organization in the world. Never anyone even was thinking about aggression against any member of NATO. And on a certain point in NATO, the decision was made that, okay, Cold War is over, so there is no need to be powerful to develop our military equipment, our military infrastructure, and so on. And NATO became weak. Now, during the 16 months of war with Russia, Ukraine proved that the threats are there. Ukraine proved that there is necessity to improve your own security, your collective security, European one and global security. And now for NATO, it's a matter of principle to become again strong, to demonstrate for Russia, but not just for Russia, for China as well, for some other countries which from time to time are trying to play dirty games in their regions, like Iran or North Korea, that North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, is strong again, and that it is able to make a decision without any consideration of any, blames or ultimatums from such countries as Putin's Russia. For NATO, it's very important. And last but not least, this is, by the way, very important for Russia. If Ukraine would become NATO member, then Russia would never think about aggression against Ukraine, because those people are not so naive that they can win in the open war with NATO. And they would put the resources not for war with Ukraine or with Georgia or with Moldova, or maybe potentially with Baltic states, but for developing its own economy, developing its own education system, health and care system, and so on. Now they're spending money for nothing, for war. And if they would understand finally that there is no chance for them to win in any war, then they would invest into their own people, their own level of life, and so on. So, for everybody, for all major stakeholders.
Right. So what I understand is you're talking more about a pathway to NATO membership. You're talking about a pathway to NATO membership as opposed to NATO, Ukraine joining NATO right away. Thank you so much for joining us on WION, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Thank you very much.
U.S. President Joe Biden is in the UK on the eve of the NATO summit in Lithuania. Biden met Sunak at 10 Downing Street, calling the relationship between the two countries rock solid, even as differences remain over the transfer of U.S. cluster munitions to Ukraine. Just a short while ago, he also met King Charles at the Windsor Castle. The U.S. president's visit to the UK is his fifth meeting with Rishi Sunak in as many months. British Prime Minister Sunak has already opposed Washington's move to supply cluster bombs to Kyiv. Sunak stated that the UK is a signatory to the convention which prohibits the production or use of cluster munitions and discourages their use.
It's good to be back. We've only been meeting once a month. We met in San Diego, Belfast, Hiroshima, Washington, here, and couldn't be meeting with a closer friend and a greater ally. And we've got a lot to talk about.
The discussions come in the backdrop of Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky's push for NATO for a clear answer on when the country can join the alliance. The warring president has also agreed to a conditional ceasefire proposal provided that Ukraine gets to become a member of NATO. However, the United States and Germany are opposing any direct indication on invitation or membership to the alliance for Ukraine. Meanwhile, Joe Biden has described the UK as the United States' closest ally. Recently, both countries signed a new economic partnership, the Atlantic Declaration. Sunak's last visit to the United States has not been a fruitful one, as he failed to establish UK's ambition for a post-Brexit free trade agreement with Washington.
Thank you, cameras. Thank you, media.
After U.S. President Joe Biden announced his decision to provide cluster munitions to Ukraine, many congressional Democrats within his own party have voiced their opposition against the move, claiming that it will cost the U.S. its moral leadership in world affairs. Many allies have also opposed the move, as the U.S. is signatory to the Geneva Convention, which opposes its use. Justifying his decision, U.S. President Joe Biden called it a difficult one to make. He said Ukraine needed cluster bombs to fight against Russia's invasion, as it is running out of ammunition.
Second, Russia has been using cluster munitions since the start of this war to attack Ukraine. Russia's been using cluster munitions with high dud or failure rates of between 30 and 40%. In this environment, Ukraine has been requesting cluster munitions in order to defend its own sovereign territory. The cluster munitions that we would provide have dud rates far below what Russia is providing, not higher than 2.5%. And third, we are closely coordinating with Ukraine as it has requested these munitions. Ukraine is committed to post-conflict demining efforts to mitigate any potential harm to civilians.
Democratic U.S. Senator Tim Kaine and Representative Barbara Lee raised concern over the decision by the Biden administration. Tim Kaine said Biden's move could inspire other countries to sidestep an international convention barring the munitions. Lee urged the Biden administration to reconsider this step, claiming he crossed the line this time. Russia has taunted the United States' decision on sending cluster munitions to Ukraine, saying the move shows its desperation. Russia says by agreeing to send cluster munitions to Ukraine, the White House has confessed to committing war crimes. Even Biden's Western allies are uneasy with this decision. Ahead of the Vilnius summit, U.S. President Joe Biden made a stopover in London and met with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Sunak had opposed Biden's move, saying the UK was one of the countries that signed a convention banning their use and would continue to supply tank and long-range weapons to help Ukraine fight Russia. Meanwhile, the Canadian government has also opposed the use of cluster munitions. It says it was committed to putting an end to the effects of cluster munitions on civilians. Spain, too, opposed Biden's decision, claiming cluster bombs could kill indiscriminately over a wide area and pose a threat. Germany, which also shared a similar anti-cluster stand, drew the ire of Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. He said that Germany should not block cluster bombs being sent to Ukraine, while China warned that the transfer of cluster munitions could lead to humanitarian problems. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen, whose country still grapples with deadly war remnants, urged Ukraine to rethink its decision. The Biden administration's decision has also alarmed the United Nations, which opposed the move. UN chief spokesperson said that an international convention banning the use of cluster bombs has been in place for 15 years.
The Convention on Cluster Munitions, which, as you know, was adopted. The Secretary General supports the Convention on Cluster Munitions, which, as you know, was adopted 15 years ago. And he wants countries to abide by the terms of that convention. And so, as a result, of course, he does not want there to be continued use of cluster munitions on the battlefield.
Washington is looking at establishing naval logistic hubs in India. These logistics centers will resupply and maintain naval ships and aircraft in the South Asia region and further strengthen the U.S.-India deep water ties. The decision on India as a logistical hub in the region comes in the backdrop of the Indian Prime Minister's U.S. visit last month. During his state visit in June last month, Prime Minister Modi and U.S. President Biden charted out a comprehensive list to boost defense and economic ties. Having a strengthened naval relationship is one of them. According to the Pentagon Press Secretary, Brigadier General Pat Ryder, the U.S.'s main aim for now is to make India a logistical hub for the U.S. and its partners in the Indo-Pacific region. As part of this effort, the U.S. Navy will sign ship repair contracts and agreements with prominent Indian shipyards. Recently, the U.S. Navy signed one such agreement with Larsen and Toubro shipyard close to Chennai. It will soon finalize deals with two more sub-builders in Goa and Mumbai. And taking the India-U.S. strategic partnership forward, a third U.S. Navy vessel, USNS Salver, sailed in Chennai.
The U.S. Navy has reached a 5-year Master Shipyard Repair Agreement, MSRA, as we've heard, with Larsen and Toubro, or L&T, for your shipyard here in Kattupalli, Chennai. A landmark development and the first such agreement in India. The Master Shipyard Repair Agreement is a symbol of our strengthened U.S.-India partnership. The USNS Salvor marks the first U.S. vessel to conduct a mid-voyage repair at L&T under this agreement. The MSRA is a legally non-binding arrangement between the U.S. Navy and private shipbuilding contractors to pre-approve shipyards to repair U.S. Navy vessels.
We're coming to you from on board the USNS Salvor. This is the US Navy's first vessel to visit India for undergoing voyage repairs. So this is under what is known as a master ship repair agreement with a private shipyard near Chennai in Kattupalli. We can tell you that voyage repair is more like a standard maintenance that happens for passenger vehicles. So after completing a certain kilometers on your vehicle, you ensure that these vehicles are serviced as a precautionary measure. So this is the same thing that's being followed for a US naval ship. So to tell you more about this vessel, this is actually not a combat ship, but this is a support vessel. This is a vessel that can undertake diving operations, explosives and ordnance disposal. This is also a vessel that can be used for rescue purposes, because when there are other vessels, stranded at sea, it can be used for salvage purposes. It can tow the other vessels. It can undertake even firefighting operations. So what is significant is that this is also the third American Navy ship to visit an Indian shipyard for repairs, and certainly more will follow. From Chennai, Siddharth MP, WION World is One.
Owing to China's increasing influence in the region, the new naval deal with India helps the U.S. Navy secure more ship repair and maintenance hubs in the region. This will enable more U.S. joint naval exercises with other nations as well. Securing its position in the Indo-Pacific is essential for the United States, since the region has more water than land, making supply during emergencies complicated. According to the 2021 edition of the Pentagon's annual report on China, the Chinese Navy has about 355 ships and submarines, making it the world's largest. And so for American vessels, and if they cannot spend more time at the sea, the U.S. will risk falling behind China in terms of naval capabilities, thus weakening deterrence. The highly anticipated Barbie movie is all set to hit the screens on July 21st, and some of the biggest stars in showbiz came out in their best Barbie-inspired outfits to attend the film's world premiere in Los Angeles, California. More details in our next report.
I knew how excited we felt about sharing this movie, and I had hoped that other people would feel that excitement too, but it's kind of come back at us with so much enthusiasm and excitement. I'm even shocked. Yeah, very shocked.
Movie's like an amusement park. It's like there's a different ride for everyone. So I think everyone can have their own experience, and that's the beauty of it.
I mean, Barbie was my entire childhood, as I think it was for most people. And also this, like, we saw the movie, and that was really inspiring.
That's all from us here in New York. I'm Susan Tehrani signing off, but don't go away. A lot more news and headlines coming up next, only on WION World is One.
WION. आने वाली खुशी के लिए एक ख्याल ही काफी है। ईबिक्स कैश हर खुशी के लिए काफी है।